Thanks, Elliot. It's a pretty optimistic overview. There's a few bumps out there. I guess my opening question to you, Elliot, is there's been a lot of discussion around corporate tax cuts, and we've obviously seen them in the US, but what's the evidence that they're going to lead to increasing investment?
So I think this has definitely become a global debate as to we all need to sort of cut the corporate tax rate to try and remain as I guess competitive as the US. And I think there is an argument to say that if you do cut the corporate tax rate, you can get sort of the wage benefits and investment benefits that the US has got. The thing to note there is that it really does need to be structured well, and it needs to work in terms of, I guess, having that sort of relationship between government and business so that you actually do get the best result. So part of the reason why I say this is if you look at the US example, you have seen a number of companies come out and actually say we're going to increase wages, but some of them have done so on a once-off basis. And that's not really going to provide a very significant increase to activity on a long-term basis. So it's a matter of trying to have that conversation and try and create the best package which should allow business to then go out and provide long-lasting change which benefits the consumers and supports growth. And therefore, you sort of get that return of tax through the government as well, which means you don't get a deteriorating fiscal position. The other thing to note as well is on investment. Part of the reason why everyone is expecting investment in the US to expand as much as they are is because they actually had the additional part of the package which looks at accelerated depreciation. So it's giving that additional incentive for business to go out and actually spend more now to actually increase their capacity and earn more in future years.
Okay, thanks. Andrew, we're probably going to have one more federal budget before the next election. In your opinion, what are the key considerations for the government as they go into the budget?
Well, I think, as I said, I think this will be a budget, obviously, dominated by income tax cuts, which means it will be a pre-election budget. It'll be on for young and old, I think, with the electoral timetable and things like that. It'll be very difficult. They won't be able to have another budget next year, so this will be the pre-election budget where they go on a campaign footing. And I think that message of income tax cuts and the corporate tax cuts, that'll be the dominant theme. I wouldn't be surprised if we see the government try and package them together. You know, we've had the corporate tax cuts as a policy for about 18 months now, since the 2016 election campaign. Income tax cuts have only sort of just really emerged in the last few months as on the table. I think for the government to make that a sellable position, they will have to somehow try and link those two packages together to get around this sort of political dilemma they've cast for themselves of looking like they're giving a handout to big business while the average battler gets nothing. So I think that'll be the really big dominant theme through it. Picking up on Elliot's point about this sort of, I guess, the grand bargain between business and the government on corporate tax cuts of selling the benefit of it. I think the difficulty we'll have here in Australia in doing that is, you know, Walmart can get a good headline and look like a good employer for giving $1,000 one-off bonus. I think the way the government has sort of structured the corporate tax cut, with the 10-year glide path where it sort of takes time to roll out, that will be a lot harder for a company to sort of deliver something like that. In that, because the benefits of that tax cut will take time to accrue. It sounds like a nice idea. Whether the government can sort of try and convince people to do it, it may well be the only way that business does get its tax cut if they do sort of come to the party in that sense.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to open the floor to questions. If you have a question, please put your hand up and they'll bring a microphone to you. Could you please state your name and your company? And could you keep your questions reasonably brief so that everybody has an opportunity to ask? So thank you.
Yeah, Michael Hill here from AECOM. Elliot, thanks for your insights around this sort of the Australian economy which interests me particularly. I noticed in the non-mining sector you didn't mention too much about transport infrastructure, and obviously that's a strong theme in Sydney, Melbourne and in the ACT as well. And that is fuelled obviously by the cheaper capital at the moment. how do you see the outlook of that over the next 5 to 10 years in terms of that cheaper capital and that flowing on to continue the investment in infrastructure and transport infrastructure, and particularly from a not only public but private investment point of view?
So I suppose in terms of the overall outlook, I mean, you're right, that there's a very large pipeline of activity coming through, and a lot of it's being supported by the public side, sort of with higher stamp duty revenue we've seen in a number of years, as well as kind of the selling off or providing leases on long-term leases on some of the poles and wires and those kind of things. So financially, there's a good sort of sound footing there for a lot of this investment that's going through into the 2020s. In terms of the cost of capital that's going into that as well, I think if rates are on hold in Australia, as we expect for the next couple of years, and if we look further than that, we only have a couple of rate hikes priced in going forward from there. Our sort of domestic rates are going to be supportive of a low cost of capital and an ability to go out and borrow and invest more so in those kind of projects. So that's a definitely positive. And obviously not only the federal government, but the state governments are in a very strong position by and large, and they therefore can go into global markets and put out those bonds and get the income to go and get the revenue to go in and then provide that investment. The tension, I suppose, is to what degree we see global rates rising. Now, as I mentioned, I suppose, with regards to the US, we do think that the rate hikes we are seeing over this year and next year are going to see much slower growth. So that is likely to be the peak for US rates. And if we look around the rest of the world, we're not talking about the same scale of increase in any other country, Europe being an example, that we are seeing in the US. So our forecast for Europe, as an example, we're really only looking for rates to end up, their sort of overnight rates to end up at about 75 basis points at the end of about 2020 or so. So overall, we're still going to be in this kind of low rate environment, which should be supportive of this kind of continual investment drive.
Andrew Beaumont, ACT Treasury. Thank you very much, Elliot, for your presentation, and Andrew as well. Just very interested in any views you have on risks to the outlook, in particular either for the domestic housing market, given potentially higher global financing costs, or other sort of international risks to the Australian economy in general. Thank you.
So with regards to housing, obviously the impact of the loss of foreign buyers is going to be something we're going to have to be watching quite closely. It feels as though it is having quite a significant impact, and it's a major reason as to why we've seen the loss of momentum. So we're hopeful that that will then sort of abate, as in the sort of worst of the loss of demand is over, and we'll sort of keep around that sort of 0 to 5, as I was talking about. But yeah, there is a risk there that is actually not the case, and we see more supply come online as people try and sell off the plan. Foreign buyers, that is, and equally they're sort of not having the sort of new demand come in to offset it. So that's definitely a risk. The more broader risk for housing, I think, is really going to be dependent on the labour market. So our expectation for employment growth is that it's going to come back down from about 3 to about 1.5, but that should keep the unemployment rate stable. And equally, given the rise we've seen in participation, we're seeing a lot more houses with 2 incomes, which should be a sound foundation for the level of prices going forward. So if we were to need to actually see, an easing in affordability by prices kind of softening through time, it's probably going to happen more in a real sense, as inflation kind of offsets the wealth there, rather than coming through in nominal terms. But the labour market is definitely a risk, and something we're always sort of considering. And yeah, that's probably the major risk I see there. The more major risk for the economy as to how that might play through, household debt might play through, is more around the consumer side. So we have a weak consumer, but we could have a weaker consumer. And that would be quite a material hindrance, particularly on the investment side, which is already quite soft for those sectors which are related to the consumer. So in my mind, that's probably my more major worry to the downside. I don't really have any particular concerns to the upside in the sense that we're at the lower bound for inflation. So we're not going to have an inflation scare like some are worried that the US might have. And we would have a lot of time to actually act in a methodical way on rates to balance out the economy that way.
Thanks, Elliot. Regrettably, I have to call the session to a close, because we have to go through the next sessions. But on behalf of CEDA, I'd like to thank Andrew Tillett and Elliot Clarke for their respective presentations and insights, and for lending their expertise and time today. So please show your appreciation in the normal way, and I have a small gift for both of them.